a really crummy day outside, so I figured it would be a good opportunity to go ahead and shoot a video inside. So I'm set up here at my table, and I wanted to talk about where DIY kind of all started for me with alcohol stoves. With my cook kit, I was carrying a huge pack with tons of weight in it, and I realized that I just really wasn't enjoying the trips I was going on as much as I could because of that weight. Looking at my cook kit, it was right at a pound, and I knew that I could cut some weight there pretty easily, and I started looking at how to do that. And one of the easiest ways was to switch from a larger stove that was a canister or a white gas stove to an alcohol stove. And then, of course, that led into changing pot sizes and things like that as well. So just kind of wanted to do a video here of the progression of where I started with alcohol stoves and kind of where I am now, and some of the ones that made it into my pack in between there. And then at the end of this, I'd like to go. Okay, so first things first, I had to figure out if I could make a stove that would actually function and be something that I could use on the trail and cut the weight that I was looking to get rid of. So I went to the dollar store, and as a trial, I bought a water bottle that had a screw top lid. I cut the center section out of it and then just inverted the top and pressed it into the bottom, drilled some ports, and I made my very first alcohol stove here. Now, I knew nothing about alcohol stoves when I started this, and I actually remember trying to use rubbing alcohol to burn in this the very first time I tested it. And shortly after that, and a little bit more research, I figured out that I needed denatured alcohol or yellow heat to be able to make an alcohol stove burn. So once I figured that out, I was pretty impressed with myself, and I did some more research, and here came the double wall soda can stoves. Now these are all over YouTube. You can find a million videos about how to make these, and it just takes a couple of soda cans, 12 ounce. You take the bottom of each can, cut the center out of one of them and press it down over the other, and then the center section of the can, one of the cans that you cut the bottom off of, you use that to make an inner wall, put some ports in it. Some of these I was actually, I drilled this one, and it looks like this one I may have just used a thumbtack or a push pin to make the ports in it, but they functioned. I usually ended up having to use a hardware cloth kind of pot stand to stand the pot up over this so that the cold water in the pot and the transfer of that cold temperature did not snuff the stove out. Got on YouTube again, figured, hey, let's go lighter, let's go smaller. Came up with a penny can stove. You did have to keep up with the penny, and it wasn't as efficient as I wanted it to be. Plus, I still had to carry that hardware cloth pot stand to hold it up because the flames would just not have anywhere to burn if you were to set the pot directly on top of the stove there. About that time, I figured out that Andrew Skirka was using a Fancy Feast cat food can as a stove. Did a little research, figured out that I could use a hole punch and make a Fancy Feast stove there at my house. And I made this, and this is a stove that was my go-to for quite a while. Really enjoyed it, and it was efficient. But then I switched to a smaller diameter titanium pot, and I needed to figure that out as well. So got to looking around and figured out that if I took that same Fancy Feast stove and a section of a 16-ounce Bud Light Stadium bottle and cut that off, pressed it inside with some fiberglass cloth in between it, I could make a stove that you could pour fuel in the top, and the flame would kind of burn directly out of the wicking and straight into the bottom of the pot, which worked well. It was a good stove, nice and sturdy, but don't know that it was right for me. So I kept going. I then figured out that I could use this is a Starbucks coffee can double shot, and this is a Red Bull. Figured out that I could make the same double wall stoves as these, but out of the smaller diameter can. It would be lighter and would function the same way as the soda can stoves. So I made a couple of these, probably 10 over the time, and really had fun with it. Got to learn a lot about flame patterns and the diameter of the holes for the ports, things like that, and kind of progressed from there. I did find that John over at Intense Angler had a lot of great ideas about how to make stoves, and I had a ton of these 16-ounce aluminum bottles from Bud Light, and I figured out that with one of his videos, I could learn how to make a roll top Bud Light stove. And you basically just took the section of the top, turned that over, pressed it inside here, and then by stretching the bottom of one of the other cans, you could press it over the top and roll the edge, which I thought made a nice clean finish to it, held everything together, and ended up being a really cool stove. It does have problems with putting cold pots of water on it and snuffing the flames out, because you're transferring so much cold temperature onto a very hot top edge of the stove, and it just ended up not being right for me. So I believe it was either Smoke Eater 908 or Tenny over at Mini Bull Designs came out with the BIOS stove. And with that, he took a longer section of the 16-ounce stadium bottle and actually rolled the entire inside of that bottle back over itself and created a really sturdy but very heavy stove. And with the ports drilled and a little primer wick around the bottom, I was able to kind of copy it, make my own. I ended up using some needle nose pliers to pinch the top there and lessen the amount of contact point on the top of the stove and keep it from snuffing out over that putting a cold pot on the top, which seemed to be kind of an Achilles heel for me for a long time. I even went to the point where I dated the bottom of this one because I was trying to figure out what would make it work right. So this was a second type that I made, and I'm not quite sure what I changed from the first one, but I made it on February 6, 2013, and I used a 3.5-inch section of the Bud Light can to get that rolled edge. After that, I kind of did away with using the primer wick, continued to make the stoves. I definitely got the inside a lot smoother, and these were a go-to stove for me for a long time. They came in under, I want to say they weighed like 0.8 ounces or something like that, and they were pretty fuel efficient. So it was a stove that I liked for a long time. I made a million. I gave them to friends, had buddies test them out and tell me what they thought, and I really liked this one. So at that point, stoves really got fun for me. I was really just kind of playing with different ideas of putting different types of pot stands inside the stove using, this has a carbonized felt that you would use to block wood if you were sweating pipes in, and I put a strip of that on the inside of here, and this is actually a piece of a titanium windscreen that I riveted together and put in there as a pot stand, and that was just a fun one to make. I made some of the ones that have the hole cut out on the bottom with that same carbonized felt cloth inside, and you add the fuel with a dropper bottle and made the flame come up. But it was a neat stove. It was fun to make and play around with. And then I tried to get a little bit more serious about it. I started taking multiple cans and piecing them together. So like this stove, I used a outside of a Red Bull can. The inside was made from a Miller Lite 16-ounce screw top bottle, and then the bottom of this can was from an 8.5-ounce aluminum Coca-Cola bottle that had a screw lid. You could barely find them anywhere, but there was a place that was pretty close to my house that had them. So I started making the bottom out of that, and that made a really sturdy, very lightweight. This came in, I want to say, at like 14 grams or so. I even went to the point of trying to make this more efficient over the different ones that I made by adding a fiberglass wicking wrap around the inside wall of it before I pressed everything together, so that would soak up the fuel and slow down how quickly it was burning and evaporating. And I actually got this to be really fuel efficient, and I switched to using a punch on the end of my vise on my workbench, and I would punch little pot stands on the top there, 3 of them in some cases. I think I did some with 4, just trying to play with the contact point and that pot sitting on top. And these, as you can tell, I made a ton of them. I played around with them for a very long time and just really tried to dial them in and get them working how I wanted them to. This one, I even tried to do 1/8-inch holes on them to make the flame a little bit more lazy coming out so that it would come into the bottom of a smaller diameter pot a little easier, as opposed to a pressurized flame coming out of a smaller jet. So that was just part of the progression. So from there, I wanted to get lighter weight and more fuel efficient. I figured this out with the 1/8 inch ports, and I went back to a double wall stove with a Red Bull can, making the inner wall for them. But I switched from using 2 bottoms of the can to using 1 bottom and 1 top. I wanted to make a stove that would use all of 1 can with little to no waste, and make a stove that would function and fill in some of the gaps of these other stoves and be just as lightweight as possible. So that's where these guys came in, and that was something that I was really happy with for a long time. I did switch back and forth from using the 2 bottoms of the stove, and I actually got a punch that is for an electrical junction box, and I punched out holes in the bottoms of some of them and then pressed them together. And on this one and these back here, you can see that I actually used a hole, like a paper hole punch, to punch the jets in there, and punch around the top here to kind of lessen that contact point again. I keep going back to that, and that was fun. One of the other styles that I played with was another one from John at Intense Angler, using a Barbasol mini travel size shaving cream can, and just putting those tops and bottoms, or it may have been 2 bottoms of them together, and then using a Dremel to kind of just grind out the in between there and make the pot stand. And with different jets and amounts of jets, I made a few of those to play around with. And really, when I made this, I was thinking, I'm day hiking, may have a cup of coffee, may have a quick lunch, and I'm just gonna need to boil something, a very small amount, maybe 1 time, and that's where these came from. So what I'm gonna do is pick out a couple of my favorites here, and I'm gonna do a quick boil for you on these and just show you how they work, give you a little idea of.
So when I was watching and
right
editing the footage for this video, I realized how long it was turning out to be. So I decided to just do a slow panning shot of some of my stoves that I've discussed in this video, with different pot sizes and different pots on them that I was kind of using at the time, or which ones were working well. And then this is the current setup that I'm using now, and I went ahead and left the end of that where it's boiling.
The final stove. I've been using this for about 1.5 years, and I have to say, this is my favorite I've ever made. Comes in at 5 grams, and I make it from 1 Red Bull can. So one of the neat features about it is that it blossoms immediately. Another thing is, it's super easy to make. It just takes 2 pieces of the Red Bull can, they fold in a certain way, and then the inner folds in a certain way, and then it slides inside the base to it. And I have had extremely good luck with this. I will do an overview of my cook kit with a boil on this thing, and some times, and show you just how efficient this stove truly is. I'll even post a video and show you how to make it. Thanks for watching. If you see anything in here that catches your eye, or any other stoves you want more information on, drop a comment in the box below, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to give you more information, or maybe even do a separate video on a particular stove and show you some of the features of it, and get a little bit more in depth with how it's made. Thanks for watching.